Hi, it's Chantal from Merseyside BLM Alliance, and I'm joined by Francisco, who... Hi, Francisco!
Hello, Chantal.
For Monday, but I saw you on Monday when we did our filming for the online event. Francisco is an amazingly talented person. Like, you have me tapping along and clapping and nodding my head to your music on Monday. You are the founder and creative director of Luma Creations. So I'm going to stop talking now. Tell us about yourself, tell us about Luma Creations and anything you've got coming up, please, Francisco.
Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about Luma Creations. Luma Creations began in 2011 as One Latin Culture. Prior to that, we had an organization called All Things Latin, and then that went and we started Luma Creations, or One Latin Culture at the time was called. And the idea of that is to promote and celebrate Latin American arts and culture of Latin American and diverse groups, artists, and communities. And we work all over the place in different ways, in different levels. Obviously, we are probably the main organization that works with the Latin American community in the region. But we are very, very keen, and we develop the concept of collaboration as a big thing. Our organization has got a range of, we're very lucky to have a team, and our team includes the board, the staff, volunteers, etc., who are from a whole range of backgrounds, from all over the world, really. You know, anything from, obviously I'm from Chile, we have Mexicans, we have Syrians, people from Iraq, we have British, Black British, we just have a whole range of different artists from India, etc. And our aim really is to promote the power of creativity and the way we can use it to change people's lives, and within the context of diversity, really. Coming up, we do continue very strongly with the Latin American community, because I think, you know, we find that it's quite an interesting setup. The Latin American community doesn't really have a center or a place, geographical place in the region, and it's very much split all over the place. You find them everywhere, but you don't. Sometimes you don't even know that's what they are. I mean, you know, from my own experience, I've been called every name under the sun, so people can't quite get it. And even when I've told people, it's a lot easier now. People know a bit more. I'm more open to knowledge about the world and where places are, but I was used to people not even knowing that Chile was a place that existed. So, but coming up, we have in 14th to 19th of September, we got Feria Latina, which is an online festival of Latin American culture. It's a 6-day festival, and we have all kinds of things. We have commissioned artists based in Britain and based in Latin American artists. We have a whole range of people doing different things. Some of our volunteers and some of our staff are also doing things like reading stories from Latin America. We are making sessions for children online. We're having conversations and discussions with panelists, and also like this one, Zoom, but with artists from different parts of Latin America who are based there. So that's quite an interesting one. And we're covering a number of issues. Some of the issues we cover, they include, obviously, the pandemic, includes, for example, one of the conversations with the Chilean artists, and it will include what's happening in Chile since the 19th of October, where there was an explosion of demonstrations and everything. We're also covering Black Lives Matter issues, but also covering issues around the indigenous people of the Americas and how they're treated and how they have to deal with the whole way in which they're sometimes not seen even as members of that country. So we do lots of things like that. At the moment, we're also working with an incredible organization called Four Wings, which, and we're working with them on a project with refugees, women. And that's a Zoom project around creativity, using creativity for health and well-being. And that's where we make stuff and we talk and we have discussions and we have a lot of fun and enjoy things and share and get to know each other. But I could go on and on. I mean, we're doing stuff. We're doing so much stuff. I mean, this week we've delivered 6 workshops. Even one we went to Wigan to a park and we did a social distancing drum 2-hour session. So yeah.
I saw the pictures of that. It looked really fun. It looked like everyone was enjoying themselves.
There were. It was really nice. And actually, we got some feedback from residents who said they really enjoyed it, and it was really nice for their state of mind to hear the drumming.
Oh, that's brilliant. It sounds like you do amazing work, and obviously speaking to you, I know you guys do amazing work. I love how you use creativity in your community engagement, especially with the female refugees. And let us know, send us anything. Is it Feria Latina?
Feria, Feria Latina, yes.
Latina, 14th to 19th of September. We'll definitely share that, and I'll log on to wherever it is. Obviously,
one last thing which I wanted to mention about what we're doing. We're doing a really interesting project that came about because of an organisation called Curious Mind, but it's called Bubble Up Toxteth, and it's basically about working with young people who from mainly 11 to 13-year-olds. And it's actually giving them sessions, face-to-face sessions, social distances, doing all the usual stuff. But we're in collaboration with 3 amazing organisations in the area. Katumba Drum Project, which is a beautiful project. Capoeira for All, another one, and Movema Dance Group. And we've all come together, and we are Bubble Up Toxteth, and we're working together with a group of children. And it was really complicated. That we didn't know whether we were going to be able to deliver it because Princess Park Ward went into a bit of a local lockdown. So the community venues, we had to close them. So we were at the point where we weren't sure how it's going to happen. Thankfully, because of the work of all the local organizations coming together and working together to ensure that local lockdown only lasted 2 weeks. It was great, so we were able to deliver the work. And this week we've done a couple, and next week we're doing another couple. So yeah, that's great as well. Working with other organisations is always really constructive and helpful and hopeful for the future.
100% in partnership work all the way, and I love that you're doing work with young people. That's like a key area of interest for me. So it's called Bubble Up. Is it just for residents in LA?
Bubble Up, well, the whole project is called Bubble Up for Curious Mind, and it's all over the region really, but the one we're doing, the 4, is called Bubble Up Toxteth.
Cool. Now I'm only asking because I'll let my son know and see if there's one near us that he can join in on. It sounds really, really good. But yeah, if you've got any stuff about that, just send it over and we'll definitely share it on the platform, because it's all about working together to serve the community. And obviously me and you were talking about this week's theme, which is refugees, migrants and asylum seekers. It's a key theme in the news at the moment for all the wrong reasons. Sadly, there was a young boy who died yesterday, Sudanese boy, on a French beach. I saw a story about someone who landed in Kent. They stepped off a boat and were instantly physically assaulted. And then obviously there's this whole attitude towards anyone crossing the channel. And when we were having a little chat, you did mention that you did come here. Was it as an exile, as a refugee?
Yeah, we came here in the 75. I was a child at the time, and we came as exiles and refugees, yes, as part of because of in Chile there was a coup and they killed the president, and many people were killed, disappeared, put in concentration camps, tortured, etc., etc. And my father was in a concentration camp for a year and a half, and we ended up, we finally was sent out of the country with a stamp on our passport that said, basically, don't come back. Don't worry, I get Zoom like that all the time when people appear and kids appear. And
sorry, you were saying something, and I was listening, and as you were talking, I was telling my son who walked in on his phone to go out, but no, that is absolutely heartbreaking, and I can't imagine.
It's, and then, we came to Leeds. We ended up in Leeds, of all places. And then, I came, so the context, at the time when we came, there was nothing for refugees or asylum seekers. There was no refugee action, no asylum link, no social services, nothing because it was just kind of ignored. Also because prior to the 70s, there was a law that basically stated that you wouldn't allowed in or get a work permit if you were not part of the Commonwealth. And obviously, Latin America is not part of the Commonwealth, never has been. So you got very few and very rare that you got Latin Americans in Britain prior to that. So we came as Chilean refugees, and we came to Liverpool. Sorry, we came to Leeds, but I came to Liverpool in the 80s to study. But there was a big Chilean community here, and quite interesting. Liverpool and Merseyside set up the first Chile Solidarity campaign in Europe. But the thing with it is that because of that experience, I've always worked in that field in different ways, whether it's cultural or whether it's creating training, development, just being part of projects and things that happen that are related to the refugee experience.
And in terms of the refugee experience, obviously your experience was a few years back. Do you feel like attitudes have changed? What were attitudes like when you came here versus what attitudes are like now?
That is a very difficult question because, I think what's changed is that some people who don't agree with the extreme right view are actually more vocal in some ways, but it's very hard for something to change when the institutions are very much entrenched in that kind of attitude of empire. And things have changed. Things have changed, but it's hard to say they've changed for the better. That some things are a little bit better. It's easier, you don't get always attacked full on. I mean, when I came to the UK, when I lived in Leeds, one of the reasons why I left Leeds was because at the time I was there, the National Front was the centre of the National Front was in Leeds, and I, like many others, I got attacked, put in hospital, all that kind of stuff that happened to many people. It's the crazy thing is that you say those things, you say, yeah, that happened to me, but it's like it's just that happened to me. It's almost like off the cuff because you're so used to those kind of things. But the brainwashing of people, it's a really difficult thing to actually get on. I'm one of those people that I won't stop speaking to people because they're racist, because if I stop speaking to them and we all stop speaking to them, nothing changes. It's easy to have a discussion about racism with somebody who has a similar view to you. But I want things to change and I want people to change. And if I want to do that, if I want that to happen, I have to attack it front on. I have to have those discussions. So, I've always been involved in this. I was very involved in the anti-apartheid movement. to the point where, you know, I spent 6 months in South Africa with South African artists and stuff. And for me, it's very much something that has changed a little bit, but it just moves around. And what's happening now, like what happened the other day, you know, people go, oh my God, isn't it terrible? But have we forgotten for example, the image of the little boy that was on the beach that died, you know, not long ago? Or have we forgotten, you know, this is nothing new, and it's not going to, and it's going to keep happening because people, and you know, people have a government and have an institution that is intrinsically racist, and it intrinsically does racist things. And you know, and for me, it's I don't know, but I see that image, and I don't get sad. I get angry, but I also get like that's nothing. I expect it. I don't know if that sounds weird, but I expect that. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
No, it doesn't sound weird. It's just heartbreaking, to be honest, because when you were talking, like, and you mentioned the little boy, I was thinking that, you know, every so often, and this is just my opinion, but the press and the media and, you know, the government and stuff, they go to great lengths to dehumanize people and to separate them from being, you know, thought of in a way as humans. So they're often thought of in like as pests, or, you know, as something that's just a nuisance. And then when you get those individual stories, like you get that image of the little boy that I don't think will ever leave any of our minds, because if you're a parent, if you're someone just with any level of humanity, that broke you in a way that, like, you know, is indescribable. That humanizes people's stories, and that makes us realize that these are people trying to cross the channel, and they're often people who are just in the worst kinds of experiences. And so what I've noticed now is they don't do anything that could make us see people crossing the channel as humans. There's all this language and this discourse around them, so they're seen in a different way. And so I think, you know, I don't know what the way out of it is, because as you've said, Francisco, it seems to something really awful happens and then everyone remembers the humanity, but then we creep back to where we are sort of now.
I agree with you to a point, because I don't think everybody remembers the humanity. I think some of us do. I think many do, but I don't think everybody, and I don't even know if it's the majority anymore. You know, we have an extremely, extremely uncaring government. Whilst they talk about, I mean, we could go into that, but that's the nature of it. And we have a situation where we had the chance to have somebody who was very caring and become something special for this country. And you know, I don't accept what people say about Jeremy Corbyn being a left wing. He's not. He's a social democrat. I know who Jeremy Corbyn is. You know, he's been involved since I came to this country in the struggle. He supported the Chilean Solidarity campaign. He supported the anti-apartheid movement. He's always been there, but he's not an extreme left wing. All his policies are very similar to the policies you have in places like Norway and places like that. They're not incredibly, you know, over the top, but the government that we have now was able to convince people through the media, and it's not going to change while we allow those things to happen, because they have the power, and people will listen to that power. You know, brainwashing and manipulation is a really, really serious thing. I mean, we look around the world. You know, we talk about George Floyd and all the horrendous thing those people, the police, they did, the way they murdered him. But then you go to Brazil, and that happens all the time to Black people in Brazil. The most racist country in the world. I mean, people don't, but they don't. But because it's Brazil, and it's a different cultural context, and it's a different language, and it's not part of the empire. People don't know as much about it, and therefore they don't see it. What happens in America happens 10 times fold in Brazil. But then you go into the indigenous element, like in Chile at the moment, the Mapuche, the indigenous people of Chile, are getting murdered left, right, and center by the Chilean government. During the struggle in Chile from the 19th of October, when children, began a demonstration that turned into something where 2 million people went in the streets of Santiago. The police basically, what they did, the army, they just shot them with, and at least 400 people lost their eyes. Not 2, 3, 4, 400. And that's happening across the world. And this connection, the thing is that that's happening across the world. What does that mean? That means that the likes of the British government, the American government, the Brazilian government, the Chilean government, all those governments, the Pakistani government, they're all connected. And racism is one of the tools they use to ensure we stay divided. And it's horrendous, but it's true. And it's brainwashing. You know, so when we talk about Black Lives Matter and we talk about what we need to do for that statement not to be just an empty statement, it's about, you know, it's about education, but it's also about understanding, really understanding what we're up against.
100% agree, 100% agree. And there is a correlation between all of these right-wing governments. And as you say, even, you know, the things that happen. I was listening, have you read Akeller's Native? He talks quite a lot about Brazil, and, you know, about depending on what colour you are, like what skin tone you are and which part of Brazil you live in, the police will just literally walk up and shoot you in the head and nothing will happen. It's just the way it is, as you said. And even like in America, George Floyd was not the first George Floyd. There were millions. The only difference was it was the perfect storm of circumstances of it being filmed, of people being at home. And had that maybe have happened outside of COVID lockdown, that might not have caused a movement. And I think as you say, it's the story 10 times over in a lot of different countries, and it's just normalized in a lot of different countries. And I just think the Black Lives Matter movement, we need to be moving for everyone, and that's why a key kind of aim for our Black Lives Matter movement with Merseyside BLM Alliance is being a strong ally and understanding that, you know, this fight is for all people who are oppressed, and that when, you know, the significance of racial oppression with things like capitalism, with things like, you know, classism and social structures, it's there for a reason. And as you say, it's there to keep us divided as people and to keep us in our place and fighting amongst each other. So looking at refugees, looking at asylum seekers who are coming for a place of safety, and, you know, rather than looking at the government, looking at corporate crimes, looking at all those things that have a massive impact on the lived experiences of working class people. And as you say, Jeremy Corbyn, he wasn't particularly wildly to the left. There are countries who are thriving, like Norway, you know, like Denmark, who are thriving because rather than looking at GDP, they're looking at the happiness of the people living there. So rather than prioritising money, they're prioritising the quality of life. So I think hopefully this movement and, you know, like the work that you're doing yourself will push people to thinking outside of what the mainstream media are presenting and to question where these links are within the media, to billionaires, to politicians, and start looking, because there is, the good thing about social media, I'd say, is you can find your information in other places. You just have to look a little bit harder. So like people listening to this conversation will learn a lot just from what you've said.
But also, you know, we need to start having those conversations with people we disagree with. And not confrontational and attacking and just calling people names because they are, yeah, of course, you know, people are, you know, there's people who are racist, the people who are all kinds of things, sexist, etc. But you're not going to change their mind by constantly disregarding and attacking them. And if we want to change, we need to change all those people. And there's many of them. I mean, you know, an example is going back to Brazil in the 80s. The Brazilian census, you could be all kinds of colors, but you couldn't be black. You could be caramel, you could be tostado, you could be chocolate. Because what were they doing? They were trying to disempower the power of the word black in the context of the Black conscious movement. And that's why they did that. And they do that consistently. I mean, the same thing with the, why the EU, why the change of the EU. What's quite interesting is that before, whilst Britain was part of the EU, the EU policy of migrants or refugees have to stay in the first country they arrive to, that doesn't count anymore for Britain, because we're out of the EU. Now they have to take on board the United Nations policy, which is a migrant or a refugee can choose which country they want to go to. So, but they convince them to vote. And I'm not going to say whether being in the EU or not being in the EU, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that we know that people are going to lie, that the governments are going to lie. We know that they're going to say anything to get them through whatever. So we need to deal with that. And we need to, I mean, one of the biggest problems with Jeremy Corbyn was that he was too nice, actually.
Yeah.
You cannot be like that in that context. I think he wants to join the conversation.
No, I'm like, do you know what? Could you say hi? It's live as well, it's getting recorded. Go on, close the door, babe. It's like 7 times. I'm like, Ollie, please stop coming in. I'll sign him up for one of your creative workshops. You can get to know him. But no, I totally agree. And that thing, echo chambers are like, if you're in an echo chamber and you're just speaking to people, as you say, who agree on the points about refugees and racism, you're not going to move or, change things. It's like, an example is I was in the Echo the other day and I put the article in 2 places, or in a few places. I put it on my BLM group and I put it on a local page in my area. And the response on both of those groups was vastly different. And it showed me the work that was to be done. But something that was quite interesting was within all of the, if you don't like it, he'll leave, all of the thinly disguised hate of just be quiet and stop talking about racism. I had a really in-depth conversation with a young lad, and we disagreed. We talked about perspectives on race, perspectives on crime, perspectives on how black people are perceived, to the point that we actually ended up talking in messages and just talking and talking and talking. And finally came to a point of agreeing about the oppression of the working classes and about the need to unify. And he's going to come to our event on Saturday. So we went from a situation where we could have both perceived each other as, we did disagree to an extent, but we moved past that and found a common ground. So I completely agree with what you're saying, because we can't just say, oh, you're racist, so I'm not going to talk to you, or you disagree. So it's nice. It is nice to think that everyone agrees with you and to be in that echo chamber and to just hear positive things. But you will never move forward or progress unless you listen to the views of other people, because quite often just sitting down at a table and opening up a dialogue can bring about change, because there's more that unites us than divides us. And it is a case of, we have to find that common ground, because what is the alternative going to be? Is refugees and people coming across the channel drowning and washing up on the beaches, that's just going to become the new norm, and are we not going to speak about it? So it is we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable in conversations and having debates, not arguments, but just healthy debates.
Yeah. I mean, I whilst my time in Liverpool, I mean, I have worked all over Liverpool, all over Merseyside. From I've done projects in Kirby, in Bootle, in Chilwell, in South Liverpool, up in what used to be known as Cantrell Farm, up in the Woodchurch Day, just wherever, anywhere. And the whole point, and yeah, I've come across, and I've been called things, and I've had this and different things, and I've, but some people can't really quite get me, because, what am I really, what am I? And sometimes they try to be nice, and there's, oh, Chile, isn't that exotic and all that, because they've got no idea. They're no context at all whatsoever. So that sometimes, if they're being nice, they can't quite get, but they, if they find out that I'm this, or they will tell me, oh, you're from a drug family because you're Latin American, and because Latin America is where all the drug happens, or whatever. or you know, or they can't quite get me. So because I sometimes look, you know, I might look, I don't know, Asian or you know, Pakistani, or I've been confused Pakistani, I've been confused Arabic, I've been this, I've been that, I've been the other. You know, I've been called white, I've been called every spectrum of the color scheme.
Racially ambiguous, a bit like my son. He's racially ambiguous, so he gets mistaken for every race other than the one he is.
Yeah, so for me, it's very much people use those things to try and feel empowered and feel, you know, better about themselves, because they and it's that thing. And for me, you know, everybody has to do what they do, and everybody has to be, obviously, you know, I will never say to somebody, you can't do, you need to push and you need to do this and you need, you know, if people can't, that's fine. But from my point of view and the way I am, I will continue, I will always question, and I will always kind of have that discussion with somebody who disagrees with me, or who is on the other spectrum of what I believe in. Because one of the things I believe mostly is that to change the world, you've got to change people, and to change people, you have to have that conversation, however uncomfortable it is, however you want to slap them, however much, but that's not going to help in the end. You know, so for me, it's always that. And within the context of refugee right now, it's a really, because the thing is that people are trying to, and it's going to get worse, because the more people want to hit out at stuff because they're in a situation which in which they're hurting, and people are hurting in this country at the moment. They're hurting because it's all about perspective. You know, they're not starving. The majority of people are not starving, but they're hurting, and hurt is not something you measure in practicalities. It's something you feel. You know, I used to be the person, because I came from Chile, and in my country there are people who really do starve to death and really have been shot and killed. And when a policeman says they're going to kill you, they mean they're going to kill you. And it's not, and it doesn't hit the news. It just happens. And you know, people, and you'll get tortured and you'll disappear. But that's I know these things. But, and I was one of the many, you know, when I was younger, I'd go, you know, when people say, oh, I'm starving, you've no idea we're starving. And I would get annoyed with them, because I said, what do you know about starving? You mean you're a bit hungry? And then I'd go into my, you know, stand on my soapbox and things, and realize that really, that was me being very thoughtless, because it's about perspective, and it's about because people's feelings are not measured by practicalities, they're measured by the feeling, and that's something, and you've got to understand that to be able to move forward. And at the moment, people here are hurting, so they're going to lash out. And at the moment, it's great to lash out at refugees. At different times, it's great to, you know, I mean, let's go back to the 80s. I used to have this same kind of arguments when people were lashing out at the miners for different reasons. But sadly and regretfully and annoyingly and angrily, people always go back to lashing out at, you know, at black people, or you know, and using the race card and all, you know, to call you this, and no, I'm not racist, but kind of attitude. But you know, but the other side is, if people not necessarily racist, but they do racist things. And you know, it's a really complicated thing. And I will say to people, look, if you're in this fight, you've got to understand that it's not a 1 day or a 1 week or a 1 year or a 10 year. It's a lifetime thing. And you have to be, you know, and you have to be prepared to understand that this does not stop. This continues. And you know, the way the world is, it will continue for the whole of your life. And you need to keep going in that. And that's the hard one.
Yeah, 100%. I like what you said about perspective as well, because I remember when I was younger, because obviously I had a rough time, like a little bit of homelessness and whatnot. So then when I was like really young, and I'd go into situations, you know, with people who were quite privileged, and they'd be like crying over things that just, to me, as someone who would often go to bed hungry and didn't really know what I was saying, would just seem really, you know, minor. And I'd get that anger of just like, you've got no idea what it's like. And again, it's perspective, because if someone's not experienced like the really, you know, the opposite ends of the spectrum, then from their place in life, something that might seem minor to someone who, say, has gone hungry, to them, it's a really big thing. And I think you have to, especially when we're talking about racism as well, it's hard because it's such a personal thing to someone who's experienced racism. So to, you know, find that balance between not taking people's opinions as an attack on you personally, and to kind of see perspectives and to foster understanding and discussion. It's a hard thing, but it's a, you know, it's the best way towards progress, isn't it? Because you can't find progress screaming at one another. So I love what you've said about perspective and understanding that, you know, it's not a competition about who's had it worse. It's about finding out how can we make it a little bit better for everyone, and just have that, again, find our humanity. And, you know, because that whole just sitting down and understanding people on a human level, it's such a beautiful thing when you speak to people, and especially when you speak to people who are different and from different cultures and from different places, because it's lovely learning about people, but just, it's like people have been conditioned to see difference as something to be feared and hated and judged, and it's just about turning that around. But I totally agree with what you've said. We've got, at the moment, it's in the media, Black Lives Matter, the plight of refugees, border control and all that, and it's quite in vogue to be discussing it. But I think, especially if you're campaigning, these are discussions which we have to, as you say, you've been doing this a lot longer than me, we have to be prepared to be having for our entire life. So we do have to find a way to have those discussions without going through the whole emotional turn and, you know, taking it really personally.
I mean, people say to me, you know, oh yeah, well, you were a refugee, you came as a refugee, you were a refugee, but it's okay, you're okay now. I says, well, I'm okay. It depends how you see that, okay? Because you never stop being a refugee. You may or may not get, you know, British citizenship or British residency or whatever, but that's not what being a refugee is about. Being a refugee has many, many, many different things. You know, it's like the people saying, oh, they want to come and, yeah, you don't, yeah, we never, not in a million years. When we came to England, I had never, ever thought about England, not once, not ever, before I touched, you know, before we disembarked in Heathrow in 1975. And none of us had ever considered leaving Chile. We didn't leave because we wanted to leave. We left because we were given no choice. I mean, that's why we were different from other refugees. You know, some refugees, the refugees tend to leave a place because it's you know, it's bad for the health staying there. Let's say, that's the difference between a refugee and an exile. An exile is somebody that has no choice, in the sense that they are literally thrown out, and that's what happened to us. You know, it was a case of we were given 24 hours to get on that plane, but my father was taken from the concentration camp and put on the plane. So you know, that was our experience, but you never stop being that person. You know, that doesn't change. However much, you know, I have done amazing things in this country. I was able, you know, I could not be the cultural activist in the way I am here in Chile, because it's a different culture and it's a different context. I couldn't just sit there and play my guitar and a living in the way I do here. It's hard, but that kind of living is a lot harder in Chile. There are other things you can do. It's a different kind of context, a different culture, but you never stop being that person, and you never stop having that background and that context, and you can talk to anybody, you know, and you will always find that. And I mean, I've had these conversations because I've worked with a lot of refugees. So for example, one of the conversations that I've had with a Syrian woman who's a volunteer with us is that for us, If we think of Syria now, if you ask people to think of Syria and show you photographs, you'll see photographs of places that have been bombed and all kinds of them. For them, Syria is that place pre that, which had beautiful buildings and beautiful this, and he had that, and he had this, but it doesn't exist anymore. So, you know, when we talk about refugees, I think we need to consider the thing. And one of the things that really annoys me is that people think that because you don't speak English very well, because you've just come as a refugee, that you're not intelligent. And so many refugees that come are exceedingly educated, extremely educated, you know. I mean, my father, when we came to this country, he was Undersecretary for Transport of the government that was overthrown. He had won an award for top economist in South America. But when he came here, because of the institutional racism of this country at the time, he had to start doing his O-levels again. And he already had 2 degrees, and he was at the top of his career, but none of that mattered, none of that counted here. It wasn't accepted. And that's happened. I have had this conversation with hundreds of people that's happened to, you know. And as a Latin American, I mean, one example is when, and we've done projects with young Latin American people, Latin American youth, whereupon, and you know, young people, one of the most important things of young people as teenagers is understanding their own identity. And Latin American young people feel very, very disenfranchised, because even if you look at an equal ops form, there's no such thing as a Latino. We are any other. And to me, I don't care anymore, as far as I'm concerned. I don't get, you know, my identity is not defined by other people. But to a young teenager, and we know what teenagers are like anywhere in the world, that is a massive kind of, I don't matter, I don't exist, that kind of thing. You know, it's only this year that the Arts Council has been talking. We've been having this fight with them for decades. And it's only this year when they've actually talked about putting something as simple as putting an additional box that's called Latino with a box, so you can tick it if you want to consider yourself Latin American.
That'll mean so much. Those are so many people, and it's like you said, it's that having a place in the world. And even on boxes like that, if you can't see yourself, then what does that do for your self-esteem and your sense of identity? But yeah, I think what you said about your dad, like, I don't know, how did your dad do after you came here? How was he after being, you know?
Well, my dad, my mum was, you know, they all eat. It's like, it took a long time. And I mean, it's just the way it is, isn't it? But one of the things that I always say to people, you know, adults find it very hard to read, and people say, but we mustn't forget that the children, teenagers, children, you know, 10-year-olds. I came as just under, I think nearly 12, I was 11 and a half when I came here. And neither me or anybody of my age were ever asked by anybody, how are you? How do you feel? You know, because everybody focused on the adults and how they were, because they're going through all that kind of stuff. But I know very well from my own experience that I remember everything, and there's nothing, you know, and there was a lot that people could have done to help going through, and a lot of young people that come to suffer a lot of mental health issues, because, I mean, that's why I'm saying it's a lot better now, because young people are taken seriously a lot more than they were then. But it's all that kind of thing, and I think it, you know, in a sense, the trip, you know, the harrowing trip that people take to get to a place that feels safe, that's just the beginning of the struggle for them to kind of adapt and feel like there's a place for them in the world.
Yeah, it's just, I wish everyone would well, everyone anyway, but just everyone, especially people who have really, you know, negative views towards refugees and asylum seekers. I wish they'd take the time to sit down and speak to the people who go through things like what you and your family went through. I did work in children's centres, and I often worked with people who are refugees and asylum seekers, and again would sit down and have conversations and talk about their experiences. And as you say, quite often there's not many spaces where people are allowed to do that, and again quite often very skilled people, teachers, doctors, who've had lives, like you say, in Syria and countries that they never thought they'd have to leave until one day. And it could happen to anybody. I think that's the bit that everyone forgets. It could happen to us today. Something could happen in this country, and all of a sudden we've just got to pick up everything we have, take our kids, and try and get to a place of safety. And I just think that place of safety should be a place where you're welcomed and where you feel safe. And unfortunately, and especially my experiences of community work, that's not always the case. But whenever I've sat down and spoken to people and just heard of their experiences that got them here, I've just felt, and obviously it's never from me, but I've just felt so ashamed that then when they got to this place where they thought that things would be different, quite often the lives are made a misery just because they look different and they've got that label attached to them, you know, refugee, asylum seeker, even migrant. Yeah, for British people who go to places like Australia, you don't get the name migrant, you get a special name, you get called an expat. And it's like the differences in the way you're viewed and regarded based on those labels. It's just shocking in the way people are treated. It's something that completely baffles me. But in any instance where one of the good things about the work that I used to do was you quite often put people in situations where they'd sit with people who maybe would never sit with them, and they talk to people who would maybe never talk to them other than in that children's centre environment. And it always gave me hope watching how someone who I knew would maybe have had a much different view of a refugee and an asylum seeker, to spending a few hours in their company and, you know, talking about things in that common ground, you know, kids, families, life, and just speaking to someone on a person-to-person level would very quickly change their views and, you know, quickly the thinking. So I do think I don't know, what do you, like, I don't know if there ever is a solution or a way forward, but just for me, I feel like, you know, understanding people's personal stories would be a step towards.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. But it's an ongoing struggle that goes on and on and on. I mean, I've been in situations where people have been, oh, you know, oh, lovely and everything, you know, they're being nice, and and I know what their views of refugees are, and so I'm quite direct, and I just go, you know, I came here and this is why I came here, and this is what happened to my family, and this is what, you know, and the crazy thing is that there are so many of these situations where, if you really dig deeply and you ask them, I have had this conversation with people that are really kind of very extreme, but then you start pushing and pushing, and then you start asking them about their background, and they don't. And I've come across people who've gone away, then come back and said, and realized that actually their background means that their grandparents came from Europe, running away from Nazi Germany, and it's like a light bulb just turned on and gone, whoa, hold on, you know, because I don't know whether it's a cultural thing or what it is, because, you know, in places like in my country, you value the elders and you listen to their stories, and they tell you about the past and your heritage and your context, and that makes it grounds you, but also it makes you understand a little bit more about those things. And, you know, I always say, I mean, it's one of the reasons why we do these projects with older people at Luma, because we want to hear more about, and we listen to the situation and how people grow. And sometimes you get a really weird kind of context, because from one side, you're getting them to tell your story, and sometimes they don't get what they're telling you, actually, and the way they're talking about something goes totally against what they've said before about something to do with refugees or with asylum seekers or with anything to do with that. And there's so much confusion in people's minds and people's understanding of themselves that it's almost like trying to get rid of that fog from them so that they get that actually, because Britain, you know, it's not as if people have been, the same people have been here for the last 500 years. That's not exactly like that. But it's a trait and it's a political thing to maneuver so that it's about power, isn't it? It's always about power and about greed and about keeping hold of the control, and therefore how do we break them up? And one of the easiest way, it's like to do that, it's like Akal and many other people have said, you know, racism is a control mechanism. You know, we didn't have that kind of situation. Yeah, we had the slave trade since time immemorial because it's agricultural, but it wasn't about race. And that was a construct to ensure to keep power, and because of that, it's really hard to get rid of it, because the people in power will do everything in their to keep power, and then they will judge other people for if they move away from being, you know, like the way they did with Jeremy Corbyn. But on the side, they're doing 10 times things that are 10 times worse than what they're accusing Jeremy Corbyn of doing. And that's what happens. And you know, that's why it's so important to have something like Black Lives Matter. That's why it's so important to make it, you know, not allow it to go away, to stay there at the forefront consistently.
Definitely, we need to challenge people's thinking and just challenge, you know, ideals about race. Because as you say, it wasn't always, race wasn't even in people's mind. There was no race until race became something which could be commodified in around the 14th to 16th century, so that people could make money off subjugating people who looked different. But I could absolutely talk to you all day about this. But I'm not going to keep you. I'm not going to keep you. We will be seeing you on Saturday, though, won't we, Francisca? We'll be seeing you on Saturday. Oh, stop it. You're coming to the event. Don't do that to me. I'm about to send you your time slot, but hopefully we'll have someone who can speak about the current issues, just about, you know, the issue with attitudes towards refugees and the experiences of refugees, because it is something that we do show solidarity to as a movement. And as I say, when one of us suffers, we all suffer, and we do have to stand together as marginalised groups. So hopefully we'll be able to have someone up speaking about that. I'm not looking at you, but I am. I'll ask while we're recording if you've got time to speak.
I don't know. Well, you'd have to send me something to tell me what it is you want me to speak about.
Yeah, I'll have a little look. I'll send you I'm sending you your time slot, so we'll I'll chat in the emails, but no pressure. I can there's a few people who'll speak, but yeah, just because I've spoken to you for now, and I'm like, you definitely speak quite passionately and eloquently, and I'd like for a larger audience to see that. But thank you so much for coming on, Francisco, and I will see you in 2 days. I will see you in 2 days.
Thank you. It's lovely speaking to you. We should do this more often.
Definitely.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And tell your son, I hope we connect creatively one day.
Definitely. I'm going to introduce you 100%. Ollie. Ollie's his name.
Ollie, excellent.